We're not even going to have time to do this.
No, we have time to do this. All right, beautiful. So we wanted to sit down at CMPX, so we made it to CMPX. We're sitting down. We're all mic'd up 35 minutes later, and speak for yourself and Brandi. This end of the table is a little bit sketchy. Sorry, Victor. Sorry, Ben. Pretty end, not so.
These are flair.
So we're in the wrong order. It should be full beard, medium beard, trying to get a beard. Then we'd be in the right order, although you'd have to be here too. Brandi's not going for a beard.
Chin strap.
A chin strap, okay. So I'll be the chin strap moderator for our discussion. But the point of us all sitting down is we all work in HVAC. We all work in different aspects of HVAC. So probably as a starting point, let's do like a 5-second, not a resume run through of what we do. So I'll start with me. My background is obviously in HVAC. I grew up in this trade working for a company called Ridler. So instead of going to camp, I went to work with Dad. Didn't realize I was building a career for myself until I was an adult. I work in distribution as a technical trainer now. Victor?
I fell into HVAC in 2005, working for two guys who had a residential commercial HVAC business. Fell in love with the industry, went through a couple of iterations, and I'm now the executive director of ClimateCare, Canada's largest HVAC contractor cooperative.
I do telecommunications engineering, and I got into HVAC through Haven IAQ out in Vancouver. So I helped organize our product development efforts, but that was like just in 2018. And so I got into HVAC because I thought that HVAC contractors knew how to solve IAQ problems. And then I learned that most HVAC contractors have a challenge solving HVAC problems. So now I'm just addicted to try to figure out how to help the industry get to a right state.
Perfect. Brandi?
Yeah, well, after giving my parents their extremely expensive university degree without having no intentions of sitting in an office, I snuck in the back door, really, of the HVAC industry without them knowing until it was too late and they couldn't get rid of me. And here we are 20 years later, so I'm a part-time instructor, a mentor for a nonprofit, and an entrepreneur now running my own business. Yeah.
Awesome. I moved to Canada in 2017. I was doing research on what municipalities are doing to help improve climate and all that good stuff, right? Turns out then, when I paid close attention, it seemed to me that the HVAC sector was missing in all of these committees, in these places where decisions were being made. A lot of my closest friends are in the HVAC industry, and so I fell in love with the industry because I like going on ride-alongs with contractors, trying to understand what the industry is doing. And so one of my friend's kids, she had a saying that I've adopted into my life's motto, which is, I have some ideas. Of course, most of them are goofy, but there are problems and I want to try. And so I have some ideas around, I do research on policies and what policies can do to benefit the HVAC sector. Most of them are goofy ideas, but I know the sector has some problems it's trying to work through, and I want to see what I can do to help and participate.
So I think the number one thing we can do in sort of solving the HVAC challenges is going to be the word I use. It's my very polite way of putting it, is that we need to make sure of two things. One, we're not in an echo chamber. And what I mean by that is where you have policy wonks, and I'm not making any shots at anybody, but you have people that are building policies that are all the same people and they all have the same message, and that's like Victor going, Mike, you're awesome. No, Victor, you're awesome. Like, we are, but how does that achieve anything? And the other thing is confirmation bias, right? So what I think is wrong, wrong's the wrong word. The challenge with our industry may in fact not be the challenge. And so the reason that Ben and I, when we were chatting of like, hey, let's put together a panel and grab a bunch of different people, right? Like you and I, you are still actively on tools, I am not, but I come from that world. I'm in distribution, you manage a large group of dealers, you're in a totally different world of your own, you're on the policies, and that's a good thing, that's not a knock, right? So what I'm curious to know is that I have a 17-year-old son standing over there operating a camera. He is about to join a 2-year program. I'm really excited about that. So for me, it was finding out that he has a different model other than the apprenticeship program. He can do a 2-year program. He'll leave that program with the G2, he can do his 313, etc. That's all great, but the only reason he knows about that program is because of Dad, right? And what I'm seeing is that in his high school, when I had asked him like, hey, you and your buddies, do they know anything about HVAC? Is there any discussion of this? And I'm wondering, his answer was no. Is that the same for you guys? Like, what's your 15-second recap of your experience? What are you seeing in the market right now?
When my oldest daughter was in, I think it was 11th grade, she had a geography project. She came home, she was asking me about what kind of furnace we had. And I was like, oh my goodness, you find what I do interesting? She said, no, we have a geography project, I have to figure out our carbon footprint. Okay, but that's a start. I think this is a very unknown industry. People know electricians, they know plumbers. HVAC, which combines all of that and more, is really not top of mind except for the people in the echo chamber. And that's a big, big challenge, because if the kids don't know, if parents don't know, if the guidance counselor doesn't know, we will never meet the kinds of requirements that the industry needs. And people will pass up on great career opportunities. I don't think we've solved that.
You make a good point. So I realized you've caught me in my own confirmation bias, because I look at it and go, they're not teaching kids anything in the high schools around me. And like you, Brandi, and everybody else here, I'm trying to be actively involved with all of the colleges. But you're right, they do talk about plumbing and they do talk about wiring. They just don't seem to get beyond that. Ben, what about you?
Yeah, nobody thinks about HVAC unless it's not working properly. Nobody thinks about the air unless it's not, mostly healthy to breathe. Like a lot of people, especially in your own homes, like a lot of people don't know that they're as unhealthy because they just get so acclimatized to it. And even with HVAC, is that if your HVAC system starts failing a little bit, as long as it hasn't stopped, a lot of people just kind of put up with it. Because it's that kind of chronic, it's just not top of people's minds. It's not integrated into our schooling systems properly. And like, it creates such a massive impact on our economy, because like the majority of systems that are out there, I think it's 80%, get replaced under duress. Meaning that like when a homeowner needs to make a decision on replacing an HVAC system, it's when it's in this kind of crisis state where everybody's triaging the situation. The contractor probably doesn't have time for design, doesn't have time for like doing load calcs or a proper assessment of the home's needs. So I have seen this as being such a massive issue that before I joined Haven, I didn't think about HVAC ever. And that is a big problem in all of our society, that unless you're in the trade, people don't think about it, and that really has to be fixed.
Well, Brandi made a really good comment at the very beginning that sticks with me, because Brandi had noted that you got a degree and then you went into the trade, right? So I'm the opposite of you. I remember sitting with my home resource, whatever they were called, and remember working with Dad since I was 9, like banging tin, doing all these things, sitting there, and he's like, what are you gonna do for a living? And I was like, oh, I don't know. And I picture my dad like literally at home being like, what is wrong with you, kid? But they're pushing me to university. At the same token, I felt like the dumb kid because I didn't want to go to university. But taking that back to Brandi, the other side of that is people are so focused on, oh, we got to catch the people in college and university and push them towards the trades. No, we don't. We need to get them before you're wasting, I'm going to use the word wasting, but before you dump 40 grand into university education and then you leave university and go, now what? Do you agree?
Yeah, I'd agree with that. And in fact, like I grew up in a family, a blue collar family. So my dad's an electrician, grandfather was a carpenter. So it wasn't that I had no exposure to the trades. Mine was more of a gender specific thing, I think. However, and I can say this with all earnesty, I believe HVAC, we are like the redheaded stepchild of the skilled trades, right? Right. And we use this word HVAC, but it's kind of like, you're not entering an HVAC apprenticeship, you're entering a 313 apprenticeship. You'll be an air conditioning and refrigeration systems mechanic, or an air conditioning mechanic if you go with 313D versus a 313A. And on top of that, let's convolute the system a little further. You need a gas license, which is a separate license governed by a separate body. There's those policies, right? And we're gonna throw that in there as well. And also, let's not forget about our 308 trade. Part of our trade is sheet metal, a completely different license, right? So when we throw this term around HVAC, no one realizes what a huge umbrella that this covers, right? Until you're out there and working actually in the industry. So I would say, but prior to COVID, that's how I felt about our trade. But let's face it, COVID was really good for business. And now all of a sudden everyone was like, oh my God, like this thing in my house that I should spend more money on that doesn't look pretty, right? I don't have this beautiful kitchen. Like you posted the values, right? The
nobody's
dollar
asking
figure.
for a granite top furnace,
right? Right? Not yet. But all of a sudden that this money, it's not getting poured into us, but really it makes such a huge difference. Now we see more residential consumers looking at UV light purification and other forms of, purifying that indoor air. So I mean, I think for awareness, from an awareness standpoint, we've seen that skyrocket since COVID. And I know personally the work that I do within the schools, where we're starting to get into as guidance counselors, which is great. So we'll do a hands-on workshop for guidance counselors, because if a guidance counselor doesn't understand apprenticeship in HVAC and the trades, how do they then relay that message to their students in high school, right?
It's so convoluted.
Right, it's broken. It's a very broken system, which many of us are trying to fix.
I think part of the problem is that there's a lot of people, and again, I have to be careful because I'm involved in a lot of the meetings too, so is Victor, I'm so you guys are too. There seems to be still this, like, I'm going to use the word pandemic of policy, where we have people determining this is how we fix the industry. I'm really good with stupid sayings, aren't I? Like, it's like the peanut butter one this morning. Did you get my peanut butter one? Yeah, I'll tell you later, guys. At any rate, it's sort of like this pandemic of policies where you've got people going, this is how we fix the trade, but it's the conversation that the three of us had yesterday. If you're going to put together a policy for our industry, you need policy makers that understand how the cookies get made, but the ingredients are Brandi and Ben and Victor and Michael and Abhi, right? Like, the fact that your experience with the trade is a little bit different than ours, that's good. But it seems to be, to me, and maybe you can speak to this on your experience, it seems to be that there's lots of policy people, but I can't say, tell me 10 Brandis that are involved in the policy discussion. Give me 8, Bens and 5 Victors. And it seems to always be the policy people or the people that just got the right ear. And sometimes those people have agendas. Like, hey, I want to fill my school, right? Like, my kid is on a wait list and cannot get into a school, but others can, right? So we're gonna leave it there. I don't want to start a big war, but what are your thoughts?
Yeah, that's it. It is a pretty complicated situation. So on one hand, it seems to me that one of the challenges with bringing young people into HVAC is that there isn't enough pull at both ends, right? Like, either people getting in. I always say, I think, and I've heard Brandi, you've talked about this before, is that the disdain for the under-credentialed is like one of the last surviving socially acceptable prejudices in our polite society. Is that fair to say?
Very fair.
Yeah, and so it's like other things, they are kind of swept under the rug, but this one people can be openly. When I go on ride-alongs with contractors, I experience what it's like to be at the receiving end of. It's not overt sometimes. It's very covert. They don't look at you the same way, and so that it's hard trying to get young kids into a sector where every day to day, you have to be public facing.
Yes.
And you have to be technically proficient.
Yes.
So it's like the worst parts of retail plus the worst parts of like working on like machines, combined with like, and the pay is not even as good as
Well,
when you're
Abhi, sell it.
Yeah, he's really pushing it. So here's a question though, just to sort of wrap that one up. So maybe show of hands, do you still feel like our industry is sort of treated as where like the dumb kids go? Because I kind of do. Like, I don't feel it's as bad as it was.
Become plumbers?
Yeah, no, well, let's be clear, I'm including the plumbers and the electricians. So the order is electrician, plumber, yeah, we all just got canceled, right? But no, where I'm going with that is that I always felt like I was the dumb kid. And I don't feel like I was, because I'm also a software developer. Like, I think some of you have seen some of the software I built, like, I'm very proud of that, but I feel like there still is that little bit of a stigmatism of the bright people are not in this industry. And if you spend any amount of time, like even people just listening to this panel should be able to figure out we are not stupid people, right? And we should not be marginalized. Do you guys agree with that? Do you still feel the industry's a little bit? Because I feel like it's getting better, but I don't want it to be an echo chamber of how I feel.
So I think a part of it is on the other end of that spectrum. I think what happens is governments pay a lot of attention to some industries, automotive manufacturing sector, maybe some farm equipment, farming sector, in part because I think we recognize that those sectors are good pathways for middle class prosperity and jobs, especially for people who do not, for a combination of reasons, want to go through a post-secondary education or go through post-secondary education and end up not liking it. HVAC, I think, has largely been ignored, and so when you're saying like, are we looked upon as one of the stupid kids or whatever? But it's not. It's just you're not even looked upon. I think the HVAC sector, especially with the manufacturing, a lot of automation happening in manufacturing, and when you look at what the governments do, is they invest policies in, okay, we've got $2 billion invested in the new battery thing. We've got this many $1 billion in the new thing, but those jobs are concentrated in one small region, whereas HVAC is spread out but fragmented. And so I think that's why HVAC, presents a great opportunity to bring younger, smart people and provide a pathway into business ownership, building intergenerational wealth, building intergenerational business leadership in communities. But the potential of that, I think, hasn't really been exposed to for people outside the sector.
And I think that that there is that classism to your question.
Good term,
It-
classism.
Yeah, it's there. Maybe it's changing a little bit, but it's like that's not something that'll change overnight. That will take generations to change. But to your point on fragmentation, that's my theory, is that like most contractors, like the majority of HVAC and plumbing contractors, are very small companies. And if they're in a local ecosystem, they're competing with each other, and thus there is no solidarity between those different professionals that are within the same community. They're at odds with each other, and so that creates this like universal fragmentation across the entire industry that then has made it so that they can't show up at trade school. Like they're so burnt out just trying to get their work done. They can make enough profit usually that they just keep on limping along in a lot of their business models, but they aren't taking their heads up to breathe because of a little bit of classism, a lot of this kind of systemic fragmentation, and that really has to be attacked at all angles, because people can't come to the table and have like kind of this more diverse representation, because everybody is in the every man for themselves mode, and that's what we have to fix.
Yeah, and that's a true statement. I think that's, segueing to sort of Victor and ClimateCare. Like ClimateCare, I don't know a lot about your organization, but I'm going to speak for what I think your organization is. And this is not a infomercial for ClimateCare, obviously.
We can make it then.
Yeah, let's do it. Sponsored by ClimateCare. Not, but sorry. So if you look at it, because what I look at is, if you look at the mom and pop operations, like my dad is still in business to this day. He's a customer of Eden Energy. And my dad is one of 50,000 contractors that are, 2-4 people. So if you join an organization like ClimateCare, you get that marketing support, you get that camaraderie, you get those meetings, you get those opportunities to come together and collaborate. Am I correct on this? I've never been to a ClimateCare meeting. Okay, just to be clear, I've never been to a meeting, but I'm not an idiot. I know Victor, I follow what they do. So the question becomes, some people are not going to want to be members of ClimateCare. Sorry, Victor. So what I wonder is, who speaks for them? Like, there are organizations, and I'm not saying that they're not doing their job, because they are, but who do the ma and pa organizations turn to when they need a voice? When they say, listen, this isn't working, my 17-year-old son has hit a bottleneck of how he gets his education, and were it not for me and my resources, my ability to call Brandi and be like, Brandi, how do I get my daughter into the trades? How many people can call Brandi? How many people can call me or call Victor, right? So what do these smaller companies do? What is their outlet for success when it comes to this networking component, so we're not fragmented?
I'll take that if I could.
Yeah.
I think that HRAI is a great opportunity. Great. I think that the local chapters, which we're working on rebooting at HRAI, I'm on the contractors board, and seeing the challenges that are there for the smaller contractors. You're right, not everybody is going to be a fit for ClimateCare. We do have a minimum size requirement. And to Ben's point, many contractors are in the 1 and 2 kind of truck mode, and that is the hardest place to be.
And it can also be the most profitable place. I'll just put that out there.
It can be, but it's not sustainable. Yeah. And those businesses, they don't, unfortunately, in many cases, unless they make it to the next level, they don't really have a business. They've got a job.
Yeah.
So what we found at ClimateCare is there are 3 ways into the trade, into HVAC contractor ownership. You can be born into it. I call that being born with a flashlight in your hand. Maybe you had this experience, Mike, on a Saturday night.
Did too.
Your dad's
a little bit, but wrong sex, as you pointed out.
Maybe you did this to Mika. Come,
no,
I need you.
No, I did not do it to Micah.
But your dad did it to you.
He did it to me,
Mike,
which is why I didn't do it to Micah.
I need you to, hold the trouble light. Yeah. Not there, smack.
Yeah, damn
the
it,
furnace
this way.
is in my eyes. Right. So that's born with the flash. You're laughing. You had this experience?
Yeah,
Brandi? Not so much.
Not so much.
Okay. So that's born with a flashlight in your hand. The second is you can kind of fall into it, and I think this is the point that nobody knows about HVAC. Most of the folks that I talk to that are in this trade that were not born with a flashlight in their hand, they fell into HVAC somehow. There was a guy they knew, owned a business, said, come, I need some help. They worked for that guy for a little while. They thought, I can do a better job at doing this than he can. I'm going to go out on my own. Then they realized he wasn't quite as dumb as they thought he was. It's hard. It is a hard business. It's very complicated. To Brandi's point, you need a gas ticket, you need a refrigeration ticket, you need a sheet metal license, you need to know electrical, you need to know plumbing. It is hard. And then the last way is, except for Brandi, most of the women that I know in the industry tell me that when I ask them how do they get into the industry, they say, my husband lied to me. He said, come, this will be fun working in the business. And it wasn't quite as much fun as they thought. So those are the 3 ways we've experienced people coming in. I think we need to be more intentional about it. And I really like this point you made, Brandi, that if you know you like electrical, you can become an electrician, it's one ticket. And for us, it's at least two.
Minimum.
Right?
Yeah, I think that's what makes it so exciting though. Like when I have the opportunity to talk to parents and guidance counselors, and I say, what you're missing, although, part of our problem, I mean, we do speak about fragmentation, but it's such a vast industry, right? There are so many different bits and pieces. I mean, I went to trade school where guys didn't even pick up an electrical meter in advance because all they did was install for grocery stores. Guys that only worked in ammonia systems. I mean, I worked on chillers. It's like, not even 10% of the industry works on that equipment. So it's just so vast, right? But when I talk to people and they say, I started in a pre-apprentice carpentry program when I tried to sneak into the trades. And then I ended up after getting a gas fitter 3, snuck into a plumbing construction company, and they actually signed me as a 306A. So when I was a third-year apprentice, I competed at skills, and that's how I got an offer to become a 313A apprentice. But I say to them, like, all those skills I used in carpentry, I use in HVAC. All those plumbing skills I use in HVAC. I go, and we do more electrical, and my dad will confirm, than an electrician. Like, my dad doesn't work on live electrical, right? And I mean, it's just so exciting, and it really presents limitless career opportunities in the end. So when you really explain to them and break it down, but that's the point. How do we get the message across? How do we deliver the information in a small enough, compact package where their attention span will receive it in the right way? Because parents are I've gone to other shows and they'll walk by our booth and they'll say, "Ugh, I'd never let my son do this." And I say, "Well, do you want them to move back home when they're 30?
Yeah.
And then they go, "What?" And I go, "No, please explain to me why you don't want them in the skilled trades." And it's all based on misconceptions. But to, Abhi's point, like, part of the problem too is you are looked down upon sometimes. Like, for example, when I worked downtown Toronto, I could be in line to get lunch and you can't tell the difference between me and the homeless person, right? So sometimes people are, they're apprehensive about even being anywhere near you. I do a dirty job. And some guys will say, some days I've had a person say to me, "It looks like you had a rough day." And I go, "Actually, it looks like I made a lot of money today." But again, how do we get this across where people are digesting it? It's received positively.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing because as a software nerd and an HVAC nerd, I'm very tuned into LLM and AI and what it's doing. And it's interesting because AI is disrupting our industry, right? And I have to be so careful because it's not disrupting the part of the industry that we're on, right? There is no AI system. I don't care what you load into these cool new prime robots. It can't sit down in front of a heat pump and do what I do, right? It can't sit down and do the combustion checks that you do. Like, there's things that it simply can't do. So I think that it's interesting. One of the challenges I see is I think that the reason that our industry is seen this way of like, well, not the very bright kids, or this is something you do if you can't do anything else, we need to remind you that when you have no heating and cooling, Brandi is really important to you all of a sudden. And I think the way we can sort of help get away from this, like, I'm going to use this word, Brandi's a dummy, and she's not smart enough to go work in a bank, is, Brandi and myself and you and everybody here, we're doing calculus every single day. Right? If we started looking at, when we're teaching kids calculus in high school, let's teach them how to calculate pressure drop, how to do velocities, how to read a pump curve. These are all things that I don't use any of the calculus I was taught. None. I have a calculator to do all of it. You know what I got to do every day? I got to do velocity calculation, pressure drop, like calculating heat of extraction. This is all mathematical things we could be teaching high school kids or grade school kids, where they actually will have value of, you're not learning some mathematical formula you're never going to use again unless you become an astronaut, but we're going to teach you how to do a heat of extraction calculation, and you could potentially use that in like 15 different trades.
And better yet, I love to remind them that I have put in as many hours to get my license as someone who has a master's degree.
Right.
So that is the one thing I like to remind them of. And when we talk about what's going to happen with their career in 10 or 20 years, it isn't backbreaking work until the day you die. That's a misconception. I mean, look at all of us sitting here today. Right?
I'm wearing a suit jacket.
I mean,
there's no dirt on me, and I'm in
none of us look broken, but I mean,
But
Victor is, but that's a story.
I hope that wasn't caught on
the
camera.
fragmentation of the industry, though, does drive like a lot of those small business owners into inefficiencies,
Yes.
into basically these burnout patterns, into running a business where they never have been taught, they've never been given the resources from their local chamber of commerce on how to run a business Like, and so absolutely it is not, it doesn't have to be backbreaking, but that actually is more normal than it should be right now. And I think back to the LLM thing, the main reason why AI and LLMs actually really exploded is not because there was a shift in the technology. There was a little shift in the technology. What it was a shift in the storytelling.
Yeah.
Is that was what did it. OpenAI, Sam Altman, that they were manufacturing a legend.
Yeah.
And that's what made this entire wave happen. And so this is like, I've said this many times before, nobody needs milk. But we all think we need milk because there has been multi-decades and hundreds of millions of dollars.
I don't need milk. I don't want milk.
Well, a lot of people are lactose intolerant now because we've had too much milk. Like, but to that point, it worked. Is that you had the dairy producers get together and they said that, hey, we need to generate this demand for our product. And so we're all going to pull these resources together, go hire a great marketing and PR firm, and then we're going to actually invest in this multi-decade campaign to try to make our craft and our product more normalized as being something that people want.
Yeah.
That's exactly what the skilled trades needs to do.
So you know me, Ben, like I don't wait for anybody to invite me to start doing marketing. I've been in this industry my whole life. That's why I'm so active on social media, because I look at this like we all have a platform and we don't have to make those platforms be about us, right? Like my message is not about me. My message is like our industry needs better. And Brandi made a really good comment. I'm not gonna try and make this be us against them, but I'm gonna make some examples. You can have a gun and a badge and drive a woo-woo car in less time than it takes you to get a license. You can go work in a hospital and have patients in less time than it takes to get a license. So why is there this level of misunderstanding of the value of this trade? Like people should be lined up to join the trades because HVAC definitely was dirty. Like the way I learned was exactly as you described, doing a lot before you're shown, making a lot of mistakes, lots of injuries, lots of profanity, like just not a good experience. I would not change it for the world because it is who I am. But the reality is that's not it anymore. You can be working in HVAC, you can be working on Belimo controls, you can be doing IoT, like you will never get your hands dirty. But the reality is that hard work, unlike manufacturing where it's being replaced by robots and AI, nobody's replacing us. This is hard work where you can make a good income and you really can be rewarded. And workers are now in a position that if you work for a garbage company, guess what? It's not like the old days. You can move on.
Leverage.
Exactly. You were going to add to that.
I want to actually go back to what you said about the policy pandemic and the challenges that we have advocating for the industry in those conversations that you and I do spend probably too much time in, advocating on behalf of the industry. And it many times I've said, I look around, I'm like, who else is here? Who else here is an HVAC contractor? These people want to set policy for our industry, but they don't invite us into the room.
Right.
And we hear a lot, well, HVAC contractors should do X. Well, and I said, why do you think that?
Yeah.
And explain to me what you think the economics of running an HVAC business are. And they don't understand the challenges that we have, the high cost to run this business, the low margins that many contractors have. So a lot about what we do at ClimateCare is try to help them have a more sustainable business model. That having a sustainable business model and doing what policymakers want you to do don't always jive.
But Victor, you made a good comment that I'm going to jump on. So you had pointed out, because you're right, you and I are involved with HAI, CIPH, we try to give back, is that you'll sit in a room, and I do this too. You and I do the same thing. We're like, okay, we're going to tell the contractor how to do this. The fact that I used to work for a family business that's still active, I don't work there anymore. I got asked to do a training presentation on how contractors can sell to their consumers. I was like, wait a minute, you're asking me to do what? I am not the person to do that. And I also added, I would be very risk adverse to anybody who says, yes, they can do this in the room, because none of you are HVAC contractors, right? I think part of the problem is not everybody is willing to do what you do and do what I do, and I'm sure you guys do the same of like, this is not my area of expertise. It's the cars and taxes joke, right? Your car broke down, and I was like, dude, you are screwed. I cannot help you at all, right? I could have faked it. I could have popped the hood and started like pulling crap out and be like, oh, it'll be great, right? But we have people like that in our industry. We're trying to get rid of them, right?
Yeah, we need to crowd in more people that, attract more people in who are in the industry and give them the opportunity to give back.
Yeah.
I think that's something that we continue to work on and struggle with. People, I'm in a privileged position that it's part of my job description to go out and advocate on behalf of my member
So
companies.
it's his fault, guys, just so we're clear.
But
The problem's a bit bigger than
the
what he can solve.
well, the challenge, but I think the challenge is that because we have scale as a co-op, the co-op can afford to pay me to do that. Individual small business owners do not have those resources. So the only way to do it, in my mind, is to come together in some kind of an association, whether that's HRAI or through ClimateCare, some other group, and you've got to come together and get some scale, because if you don't advocate on behalf of yourself, nobody else is going to do it for you. And so when we have HRAI meetings or chapter meetings, nobody comes, right? Unless it's a hot burning topic. TSSA,
Ooh, yeah.
right? That's a big one.
Yeah.
Skilled trades, draws people out. Somebody's going to tell them what they have to do. I'll come to that meeting. But we need folks to come out and get involved so they can have a voice at the table.
Yeah, I think that's a really good comment. Is not only do you need to show up, but you need to show up at things that maybe you don't think you should. So one of the things that comes up frequently with me as the heat pump guy is I will spend a significant amount of time with different gas utilities, whether it's in Ontario or BC or the States, and I will have people comment like, wait a minute, you're an advocate for heat pumps, why are you talking to the gas utility? And what I like to point out is that if you want to be part of driving a solution, you should feel comfortable to sit at any table, and am I more likely to have positive change in the parking lot, picketing, being a dick, just to be French about it, or sitting at the table and being an adult, the B's like, I'm never doing a panel with you again, being an adult and listening to somebody else's perspective, right? Sometimes you have to put yourself in those uncomfortable situations of, okay, what is the situation? Because we wrongly assume this organization isn't on our side. Well, have you even shown up to find out what's going on? They could be waiting for a Brandi to show up and be like, this is what we need to do.
I think the responsibility goes both ways, Michael. Is in that, in what you were saying, and I think you were right to pull up contractors a little bit and say, yes, you need to show up in places where decisions are made, or show up where decision makers gather and give their input. That is correct.
Yep.
I also think policy makers, policy shapers, researchers, people like myself, should take the initiative to spend more time with contractors. Go to these meetings. Come here. How many policymakers do we see around here? Right?
Yeah.
What is it? 10,000 people around these schools? There's very few. I mean, let's be honest.
Yes.
I would love to see. I know the premier was here earlier, which is nice. And then, but there's no.
For the ribbon cutting ceremony.
Exactly. Shook hands, I believe, and then left.
Photo op.
And then, but there's other. There's an entire department of people that could be here.
Absolutely.
Spending time, taking notes, listening, sitting here, watching us speak, watching presenters speak, and reaching there. So that's one component of it. The second component is that Canada expects so much from the HVAC sector. We want the HVAC sector to be a partner and put your shoulder to the yoke when it comes to climate goals, shoulder to the yoke when it comes to housing goals, shoulder to the yoke to find newcomers and young people jobs. But then I don't think that from a policy perspective, the Canadian government and the institutions have focused enough on understanding these barriers and exactly identifying where they can provide some resources so that we don't keep circling this frame over and over again. I think there is a lot of reason for optimism, and this is why my general disposition is to be optimistic.
Me too.
Yeah, totally. And that's why I enjoy being around tables like this.
Yeah.
And what I'm hearing when I'm talking to contractors, and actually this more less of HVAC, more of home renovation, is that a lot of these now, because a lot of young people worry a lot about housing, worry a lot about climate, and those concerns are now starting to reflect in their career choices. And so these home renovators, the ones that are leading in the front, doing like green architecture, green renovation, they're getting calls from high school kids saying, how can I come work for you? I want this because I know this will be a big boost in my career. So they are drawing in young people. Perhaps they are drawing in like entrepreneurial, smart people who can kick butt and all those kind of things. And I see HVAC not being its own separate thing, but being a part of like this larger sector that is improving homes. And so I think when we think of our role in HVAC in that way, I think I'm optimistic about the role that HVAC will play in building the kind of homes that Canada needs to meet our future goals.
Yeah.
And I think that's the pathway for us to bringing new people, is to see, to give them an opportunity to see themselves in our national climate goals, in our national housing goals, and things like that.
So you had asked me yesterday when you and Ben were hanging out, like, hey, how would you change the policies and the way they're structured? My answer was, I have no idea. I'm not a policymaker. But as we've been sitting here talking, two things have come to mind. Number one, we have to do this again. This was fun. Let's do it again. Like it's definitely a good discussion point because we all have different perspectives, but we're on the same page. And I've come up with an answer to how I think I would do it. Because part of, and I could be totally wrong, I'm not involved in policy, right? I think it's a little bit of cult of personality, and you see this. We get involved in organizations, there's certain loud voices that get their way because they have the cult of personality. That's not a bad thing. I have a loud voice, I just try not to make it be about me. But I think, right, like that's important, right? You don't want to make it be about an individual. I think that one of the ways you could potentially develop effective policy would be, and what I would do is come to an event like this and sit in on the panel discussions, and you do not need to be an expert in the industry. Like anybody walking by, that here's the five of us talking, what are we trying to sell right now? What are we trying to promote right now? We're literally just trying to figure out how to fix our trade, right? How to fix our industry. You can sit in these different panels and realize like, wait a minute, this B guy seems like he's got some pretty good ideas. We should talk to him. We should talk to Brandi and get some ideas. Like, we're not getting paid to do this. We're doing this because it's something that's important to us.
So I want to add something that's missing to that, the cross-pollination is great, but there really needs to be a unified strategy from the leaders who kind of get together and say that, for this quarter, here is the one big thing that all of us are going to be working on in whatever way we can do it. Because right now, I have seen this all over the industry, people being like, here's a thing that needs to be changed. And they're right, but then they will maybe they'll put some effort in, they'll make some impact, but without collective action, all those impacts are going to be minimal.
Yeah, but it's the first person syndrome, and I see this, right? And I think it's really impersonal, like as a type A personality, I'm very conscious of don't have first person syndrome. And what happens is, Victor, here's a problem. And Victor's like, I got this. But he forgets like, wait, it's not Victor's problem, it's our problem. And where I'm going with that is what you're saying. Victor can carry the message, but the message cannot be Victor's, right? And I see that a lot where somebody will be like, this is my problem, and then suddenly they're hobnobbing with somebody influential, and it's like, wait. This wasn't about you making money, this wasn't about you having this big brand recognition, we've still achieved nothing. This is about achieving something. So I totally agree with you. I think the first person syndrome, and I'm not saying that happens, but all the time, but it does happen where...
share my LinkedIn post.
And that's kind of what I hope will happen with Better HVAC, is that it can bring in the that lack of ego and the lack of product promotion, how it just helps people understand being like, okay, here is the problem that is the biggest right now. We have enough people kind of voting on it, or at least putting in their input saying that, yep, that is a big problem, and that is something that collectively, with the resources that are involved, we can make an impact if we all do it, if we all push at once.
Right.
And so that's what's needed is to be able to just on a regular basis, get together, this is the theme that needs to be fixed, we attack it, and then we try to see if there's an impact, but without that being as many people that we can dogpile, because right now what's happening throughout the consumer markets is boycotts, and those are working.
Yeah.
Because it's collective action, how people are realizing, being like, oh, if we just talk to each other and say that, oh, we all have these similar kind of needs, we all have the same problem right now, and instead of grumbling and then a couple of leaders doing their thing, everybody democratizes the ability to participate, but it's in a unison. Where it's for this quarter, this is the boycott. Yeah. And so that is the type of collective action. Like I was doing research on, Luddites and stuff like that, and also just over the years, all the different, riots and kind of collective action that's happened to try to transform the market. And we are ripe for that happening right now. There's so many people in the industry that are burned out that if you gave them a path to say that this is how, we're all doing this one thing right now, instead of saying that, oh, just go get involved with your trade school, get involved there. That's all so general. It has to be specific, it has to be timely, and then it has to be kind of democratized and accessible. Everybody needs to
measurable.
Measurable.
Yeah,
Exactly.
for all of our statistics people, we need measurable change, right? We're all about the numbers. I love the numbers, right?
We've got data nerds in our group.
Yeah,
right?
I was going to say, so when you want to talk about that specific thing for the quarter, before I leave you all very, very shortly, measurable for me is key. Right? Because if there's no way to measure that change, then what are we all doing? Again, we're just sitting around having a conversation, which is fantastic.
Yeah.
But the proof is in the numbers, and that's what people respond to. They respond to saying, we did this, and this happened. And then they're like, Oh yeah, okay. So that is
So what I like about Better HVAC, and I'm not trying to make this be a pitch for Better HVAC, and then we're going to wrap up because you have somewhere to go, I got somewhere to
I gotta go.
But what I like about Better HVAC is, I saw Better HVAC, I talked to Ben, and I had said to Ben, like, Ben, understand, I want to be involved, but I do not want to be like a person. You know what I mean? Like, it's not, I don't want it to be about me. And he's like, this whole organization is built that way. I was like, great. I think Better HVAC is an opportunity for people that don't have a place where they can go and have a message. But what's really important to me that we also talked about is this is not a competitor to HRAI. This is not a competitor to TECA. The point of this is there's a different audience that can collaborate with groups like HRAI so that if I'm in a meeting or Victor's in a meeting or if you guys are in these organizations, go, listen, this isn't just me. I've got a whole, grassroots organization where the structure is quite literally, this is our goal. Let's achieve this goal. That's it. There doesn't need to be a hierarchy. There doesn't need to be dues and BS.
It's a movement, not an organization.
Yeah, I love it.
Yeah, it's like a message board that if HRI needs strategic help, they can post that to the Better HVAC and just being like, this is the measurable, timely work that needs to get done. Yeah. Then you have hundreds of these people that want to make a change. They'll be like, how do we help?
100%.
One quick thing before we
be quick though, you gotta wrap.
So as a result of this conversation, I can commit to one action that I will do.
Okay, you're being filmed on 3 cameras.
Let's go. Okay, I will go talk to these guys. I'll go talk to Plumbing and HVAC magazine or other HVAC magazines.
Yeah, you're already in Plumbing and HVAC. That was done.
Yes. Okay, that's all. So I will go find other opportunities to take my ideas and research out. So I'm doing a better job of connecting with partners directly in the mediums and place where they get the information. That's my commitment. What's yours?
To keep doing what I'm doing. I mean, I think you guys know what I'm doing. I'm all over the internet. My big thing is I'm just trying to open doors and stop gatekeepers, right? Anybody that's wants to close the door and keep somebody out, I'm cracking windows, I'm cracking doors. I want to make it be about what Victor's doing, what Ben's doing, what Brandi's doing, what you're doing. That's my commitment, is to do that more and be loud, but be positive. What about you, Victor? What are you going to do?
Well, I just recently became the chair of the HRAI Government Relations Policies and Procedures Committee. So in that role, I'm going to reach out further into the industry and bring people in to talk about what is important to them. What are the hot issues that we need to bring to government on their behalf, to advocate to policymakers and say, wait, we've got thousands of members here, people adjacent to our membership that have a voice that needs to be heard.
Yeah, speak with, not to. What about you, Brandi? I'm going to skip over Ben here because I know you're better HVAC.
I'll do Better HVAC stuff. Well, I'm basically doing what the two of you are doing.
Yeah, we're doing the same thing.
Amplify good
100%.
stuff that's happening.
And you know what, I'm on the same page as all of you, except for I'm going to spearhead the problem from the top-down approach to try to make the industry more inclusive for women, and so that we can grow our businesses. And with that diversity, we are going to actually, it'll organically have other solutions that it'll do some of the work for us, right? Yeah. So, and in that respect, when we talk about, getting more people into it, more visibility, we're talking to high schools, we don't have a choice. If we're not going to be inclusive, what's the point? We can't target just only certain students. We have to make it inclusive for everyone, especially with that newer generation coming up, right?
So
we want to embrace that evolving workforce.
Let's plan that we'll reconnect.
We'll
do another video, maybe in a month, and we're going to talk about what did we do since we sat here and talked, and more importantly, who else, measurable, but who else did we engage, get involved? Victor's the big boy at the table with all the connections. So he's got all the pressure.
Fantastic.
I have a medium amount of pressure. But this has been fun.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. On the fly, awesome. Fast and dirty, it was perfect.
Now we have to go to other panels.
Okay. Thanks, guys.
See you later.
We need your mic.
Microphones.
Thanks for doing all the audio.
Yeah.